Okay, this video briefly talks about Talcott Parsons' sick role and the illness experience. According to Talcott Parsons, the sick role is defined as behavioral expectations of a sick person, and the sick role is defined entirely based on patient-doctor relationship. And there are 4 assumptions associated with this role. It's assumed that somebody gets sick due to factors beyond his or her control, and that person should be excused from work because he or she cannot fulfill normal roles and responsibilities. And it is also assumed that the person will get well ASAP. And it is also assumed that the person will seek professional help when he or she is sick. Think for a second. Are all these assumptions associated with the sick role valid? Use your critical thinking. And Talcott Parsons assume that the person will progress from a healthy state to being a sick person. Then the person will seek help, and finally the person will recover. As you can see from the diagram on the right, Parsons assume that the sick person will go through these 4 phases. Why don't you think for a few seconds about this diagram? Think critically about this diagram. And maybe that conceptualization works during Parsons' era. But with the advent of technology and other infrastructure, now the illness experience, in my humble opinion, is beyond the doctor-patient relationship. We see Susan Komen. She initiated the idea of the pink ribbon through her breast cancer foundation, and her purpose is to make the public aware of the breast cancer so that they are not afraid to come forth with their symptoms and to seek help. And nowadays, we are challenged by the coronavirus. And this again tells us that the sick role is beyond the doctor-patient relationship. Many times, like the pink ribbon, the community is also involved. I'm sure you've seen in many avenues, online, on the news channel. Now, many companies, factories, or the public, they volunteer their time and resources to make face masks for medical professionals. So this is another indication that the sick role is beyond the patient-doctor relationship. Many times, like the pink ribbon, the community is involved if they care deeply about that issue. So, if you go to my other YouTube channel on genetization and biosociality, nowadays we have so many online forums on different symptoms, medical issues, health conditions, different diseases and illnesses. And sometimes these forums were started by the general public. And at times, medical professionals, nurses, PAs, pharmacists, doctors, nutritionists, they also participate in this online medical forum. So, with the advent of social media and internet, it's going to change our illness experience. And all these medical forums online again implies that the sick role is beyond the doctor-patient relationship. And think about this diagram on the right again. You've seen this in another slide before. Do people always progress nicely over the 4 stages from healthy to seek help to recover? Do people always progress nicely across these 4 stages? Was relapse and remission factored in on the diagram on the right? Sometimes we know relapse and remission do happen, and sometimes immersion do happens too. Was immersion factored in on the diagram on the right? Immersion means the disease is going to consume more and more of a person's life. Is that being factored in to the diagram on the right? Think for a second. And oftentimes we know that the state of being sick is subjectively defined. People perceive sickness differently based on their subjective perceptions and experiences. And sometimes we know our social environments, they interact with our genes to change our phenotype traits or phenotype chains. And sometimes our external environments, they interact with biomarkers to determine our health outcomes. Are genes and biomarkers being factored in to this diagram on the right? It seems to me that Parsons' sick role applies more to acute illnesses and less to chronic illnesses. Just my 2 cents. And many times it has been determined that visual performance or other health statuses can be classified in different ways, from excellent to poor. And sometimes people can move from poor health to good health and vice versa, or poor health to fair health and fair health to poor health. So why don't you compare the different classification for visual performance and other health statuses to the diagram on the right? Sometimes I think it's possible for people, for us, to move back and forth within each stages. And the same thing for dementia. People progress through the 6 stages below. And are those being factored in to Talcott Parsons' definition of the sick role? Why don't you think for a second?